How to model a marble runway funnel. So here's another interesting user submission. I had no idea what this part was at first, but it is actually part of a toy. So they were especially interested in this transition between the spherical part and the cylinder part. Of course, before starting to model, I collected a bunch of reference and I found out that it's called a twister expansion piece. And so it's collecting a marble and then the marble rolls around in it and falls through the hole. So I was able to take some screenshots of videos and just find some images on Google Image Search, and I found some measurements. So for example, it is 95 millimeters wide and this cylinder part is 32 millimeters. And you can see from the side here that it's basically half a cylinder there. And the hole is 25 millimeters. And here's a nice side view that I grabbed from a video where you can see that this edge actually sticks out a bit. And let's have a look at this shape. I recommend that you draw a shape like this first to explore all the other measurements as well that you can find out. So this is the basic shape from the side. And I'm just using Krita here to draw some simple sketches. And what we know is that the total width is 95 millimeters or 9.5 centimeter. And I think that this part is about 3 millimeters. Unfortunately, I don't have the exact measurements, but it looks like 3 millimeters to me. And the thickness of this looks to be about 1.5 millimeters to me. It could also be 1 millimeter, but I think 1 millimeter is really very thin. So it is more likely that it is 1.5 millimeters. And that part is just extruded. So we really need to worry first about the ball shape itself. Now for the cylinder part, we basically have a cylinder like this, which is cut in half. So it's basically this shape. And I'm going to say it's also most likely the same thickness as the rest of the ball. So it's also 1.5 millimeters. But it also has this extruded part on the side. And together with the extrusion, that half cylinder is 32 millimeters wide. And the extrusion also goes all the way around the rim of the cylinder. Now, the measurement that we really want to know actually is the width, but without all the thickness and without the extrusion. So we have 3 plus 3 millimeters of extrusion. So 95 millimeters minus 6 is 89 millimeters. And for the cylinder, we know that it is 32 millimeters minus the 6 millimeters of the extrusions on both sides. So we get 26 millimeters of width for the half cylinder. Of course, these are measurements that we couldn't see on the reference images. And that is why it's very helpful just to take a moment and think about what you're modeling and maybe even make a sketch like this. It might save you hours of modeling. So this is a good reference image where you can see that overhanging edge and how much smaller the ball and the cylinder actually are. And finally, one last detail is there is the hole in the middle there, and that is 25 millimeters wide. So let's start by setting the units to millimeters. That will just make it more easy. And then we can add a UV sphere. That is a very good kind of sphere for this case. And we set it to 89 millimeters. And as you can see, that makes it very small. So we need to zoom in quite a bit and apply the scale with Ctrl A. And let's set the scale of the grid to 0.01, just so we can actually see the grid. And let's add a cylinder as well, just for reference. And let's set that to 26 millimeters and apply the scale as well. And let's rotate it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. And then we can move it to the corner here. And let's zoom in so we can really line it up. And then in X-ray mode, we can select the front vertices and just move them on the y-axis like this. And here I'm selecting this middle ring of edges and I'm pressing V to separate it. That's the rip tool. And then pressing L to select all of those top faces and deleting them. And here I'm also going to delete the top half and the caps of this cylinder. And the reason everything is red on the inside is because I have the face orientation option turned on. So I'm just going to turn it off for now, otherwise it's a bit painful for the eyes. And the reason I kept applying the scale of all these things is because I'm going to use a solidify modifier later. And it's important that the scale is applied so that the solidify modifier can work accurately. And I'm just going to add another cube, and this I'm going to use as a cutter object. And I'm just going to turn it to bounding box instead of textured. That way we only see the bounds. And that is because I want to create this transition part between the cylinder and the sphere. And let's move this bounding box so we can create that cut. And I'm just going to zoom in wireframe mode, just to where those two things meet. And then shift and right clicking to put the 3D cursor there. And then we can really line up that cube with where those two meet. So let's zoom in even more and really accurately put the 3D cursor there. And then we can set the transform pivot point to 3D cursor so we can rotate it from there. And then we can line it up to the other part where it intersects. And so now we can use that cube to make a Boolean cut. So we've zoomed in all the way to make it really accurate. And so I'll select the box and then Shift and select the sphere and then Control and minus on the numpad. And then if you have bool tool enabled in extensions, then you get this kind of Boolean cut. And then we do the same thing with the cylinder, except with the cylinder, we need to set it to intersect instead of difference. So you can see that sliced off the parts that we don't need. And now let's set the 3D cursor back to the world origin. And now we can scale that sphere on the Z-axis until it lines up with the cylinder. Very important though is to do that in edit mode. That way when you scale it, the overall scale of the object is not affected. And that way the solidify modifier will work better. So as you can see now the cylinder and the sphere line up. So I would call this our Boolean blockout stage. So we basically just created this to make sure that we know exactly what the shape is like. And I'm going to put this in a collection called Boolean blockout. And I like to work this way where I work in different stages and keep the things from the previous stage. So I'm just going to duplicate this collection with all this stuff in it. So right click and duplicate collection and then turn that previous one off. And then we can rename this one to mesh, for example. And we don't need this cylinder anymore. That was just for reference. And we also can apply the Boolean. And by the way, that apply all button is from the modifier tools extension. I'm just moving this up because the grid is kind of annoying me that it's always in the way. And then we can just set the origin to the 3D cursor there. So far so good. Now we can see if there's anything we need to clean up from that Boolean operation. Usually there will be some vertices that you don't need or vertices that you can slide and auto merge like this. And I think we can probably also slide and merge these two. So you can slide with GG and then they will merge as long as auto merge is enabled. So now we can select the vertices that will be extruded for the cylinder and then just press E to extrude and then Y for the Y-axis. And just make sure that auto merge is disabled and then scale it to 0 on the Y-axis and then G and Y to move it to about here. So now we have our cylinder extruded from our sphere and we just need to do a little bit of work here where there's a triangle. I'm just going to use the knife tool with K and then select these two triangles and press F to turn them into a quad and then double G and slide this out of the way a bit. And the reason I'm sliding it a bit further away from those other vertices is just to make sure there is no pinching in that area. Because the closer together vertices are, the more likely you will get some sharp lines or some pinching. And let's have a look at what this looks like with a subdiv modifier. And let's turn off the wireframe and let's shade it smooth also. So that already is starting to look pretty good. And let's click on this button to disable the subdiv modifier in edit mode. And let's add a loop. And I press E for even and then F to flip. That way we can add a loop over there. And I will keep that part sharp when it's subdivided. And I just switched to another matcap. And I'm just adding another loop and using E for even and F for flip. And I'm just going to double G and slide these vertices a bit farther away from each other so that it's nice and flat there instead of pinched. Because we don't want that part to look sharp. So something like this should work. And maybe we can slide them even a bit further away. So as you can see, that looks pretty nice already. Let's turn off the wireframe. So let's add the hole at the center there as well. So for reference, I'm just going to add another cylinder and set it to 25 millimeters, which is what we know the hole is, and apply the scale. And if we add subdivision, we will need to delete these two caps. That makes it easier to subdivide it. And I'm just subdividing it so I can really see how big it is. And in wireframe mode, we can see it. And then we can add a loop to the other object with Ctrl R. Let's turn on the subdivision modifier there as well. So the loop needs to be right about there. So it should be in that location. And so let's see in solid view and we can rip that loop with V. And then select that part that we don't need and delete it. So here you can see that because we deleted those interfaces, we now need to scale this loop up a bit. Otherwise it is too small. So we scale it up with S and then we can delete that reference cylinder. So that is the hole in the center done. And if you want to double check, you can select two opposing vertices and press F to add an edge in between. And you can turn on the edge length measurement. And you can see that this is, I don't know if you can see it, it's quite difficult to read, but it is 25 millimeters. So let's turn it off and just delete that edge. So although Blender is not really great for very accurate modeling, it is still possible to use that kind of measure tool. So now let's add a solidify modifier and let's drag it up so it's before the subdiv modifier. And let's set it to 1.5 millimeters. But as you can see now, we need to change the offset to 1. so that the thickness is added on the outside. And let's enable the wireframe just so we can look at the topology. And you can get a bit better result by enabling even thickness, or you can set it to complex mode. So we can set it to complex mode, and then the quality is just a little bit better. And let's just apply that solidify modifier. As you can see here at the top, we need to flatten those vertices a bit. So let's select the top loop, set the cursor to that selection, and then select all of the top vertices and scale them to 0 on the z-axis. And this way the top faces are all flat. And now we just obviously need to fix this area here where there's a bunch of overlapping stuff. So just select vertices and just double G and slide them. So double G to slide, and slide these out of the way as well. And these as well. So double G and slide, and double G and slide. And same here, you just need to slide them because now they are just in the same place. And you might have to set it to wireframe or X-ray mode to be able to select or see the vertices. And here these also, let's slide them a bit further away from each other. Because the closer these vertices are together, the sharper that corner will be. And we don't really want it to be super sharp. So let's slide these a bit further away. And I think that looks pretty good already. So we're just kind of relaxing this topology. But overall, I think this is a pretty good topology so far. So next, let's add this extrusion, which creates this overhanging edge on the side, which is also 1.5 millimeters. So we will need to extrude it by 1.5 millimeters. And as you can see here, it will then look like this. So how are we going to do that? First of all, we need to add another edge loop. And I just noticed that this cylinder can stick out a bit further. So let's just select these faces, Ctrl+ to increase the selection, and then G and Y to move them a bit further out. And we can double G and slide this, and that looks a bit better already. So first thing is we have to add a loop with Ctrl+R. So Ctrl+R and slide it over there. And let's turn edge length back on. And then we can see once we double G and slide it, we can see the edge length there. So let's slide it until it is about 1.5 millimeters. And you can hold Shift to be more precise. So this is now 1.5 millimeter, and let's turn off the edge length measurement. And then let's select some faces that we want to extrude. I'm just going to do this in 2 parts. I'm going to extrude first around the sphere. So I'm just holding Control and selecting these faces all the way until here. And then I'm going to extrude with Alt-E, which is giving us the extrude along normals option. You can also find that from face, extrude along normals. So just go to the face menu, extrude along normals, and then just extrude it 1.5 millimeter. You can fine tune it in this menu here. So 1.5 offset. And it looks like the extrusion needs to be moved up a bit. So let's select this and in X-ray mode, move it up on the Z axis until it lines up with the other edges there. So G and Z to move it up. And so now we have part of the overhang already. We just need to have the overhang there on the side of the extruded cylinder. So this part. So let's move this to the side a bit and let's extrude this part. I'm just extruding it on the X-axis and then setting it to 1.5 millimeters. And then let's scale it to 0 on the X-axis to make sure it is flat on the X-axis. And then we need to deal with all this overlapping stuff. So let's go to X-ray mode and move this on the Y-axis. And then we need to delete some faces here. Just select these and delete them. And let's also scale this to 0 on the X-axis so that it is also straight. And this is just a matter of lining things up on the X and the Y-axis. And looking at this, it looks like this extruded edge is also not really perfect. So we might have to select this loop at the bottom here. So let's Alt and left click on that and then have a look at it from the top orthographic view in X-ray mode and just scale it up with S. And now it should be a bit better already. And I'm just trying to make these edges line up as best as possible by scaling and moving them on the X and Y axes. So just G and X to move that towards that other face there. And then we can merge these vertices. So M to merge, and then you can choose at last or at center, depending on what you think looks best. So I'm just double G and sliding these vertices to merge them with auto merge enabled, and then selecting these 2 triangles and pressing F to turn them into a quad. And then here at the bottom, let's turn this into a face by selecting these 4 edges and pressing F. And here you have to turn off auto merge because otherwise they will just merge and we definitely don't want that. And that's just because they are already so close together. So just move these away from each other a bit. And I think that is fine. Just some small tweaks maybe. And overall that is okay. And because this is for animation that I'm going to render with physics inside of Blender, I'm not going to do all kinds of support loops to keep the edges sharp. I'm just going to use creasing. Now we still need to continue the extrusion around the cap of this half cylinder. So let's double G and slide this, and we might have to press E for even and F for flip until we get it about 1.5 millimeters from the side. So let's turn on edge length and check. So when you slide, you can actually see the measurements of all the other edges. So let's slide it until that is about 1.5 millimeters away. So now these edges are 1.5 millimeters, and this is what I'm going to extrude. So let's just delete this face and then extrude. But let's turn off the edge length measurement, and let's also delete this face here. And then let's select these faces that we're going to extrude. And let's extrude them along normals. So Alt-E, extrude along normals. And then let's move them 1.5 millimeters. So let's undo that and try again. So Alt-E, extrude along normals. And now we can see until it is 1.5 millimeters. So hold Shift to be more precise. And then we can turn that off again. So now we have a nice extrusion, and we just need to delete that face and merge these vertices. M and then merge it last. And that looks good. And let's merge it on the other side. I should have deleted the inner face there, but I forgot. And you will see that it causes me some trouble later. So it's good that it happened. It's always good when there's a little mistake. Then I can tell you what to do when that happens. Let's turn the subdiv modifier on for a moment. And it looks like we need to add some creasing to keep the edges sharp. Let's select the sharp edges. And let's deselect the parts that we don't want to keep sharp. So hold Shift and then click on the ones that you don't want. And let's have a look all the way around the model. And here there are also some edges that we don't want to make sharp. So just deselect those as well. And deselect those as well. So basically everything that is a sharp corner needs to be creased. And I think that is a good selection so far. So now we're going to press Shift E and 1 on the numpad. Or instead of the keyboard shortcut, with those edges selected, you can go to the item menu and then increase the mean crease value to 1. And so now when you add a subdiv modifier, those corners will remain sharp. But here, as you can see, there is a little issue, and part of it is because there is a hidden face. And it also looks like I need to flatten some of these faces. So let's select these faces and then scale them to 0 on the y-axis. And so now they are flat. And we can also move this a bit. And so let's have a look. And this one also needs to be creased, by the way. So for some reason that corner was not creased, probably because there is a hidden face there. And so I discovered that because I had to look at it in wireframe mode and in edit mode. And here you can see that there is a face that needs to be deleted. However, with the face deleted, there is still a little bit of an overhang issue. And that is just because there is not enough geometry to protect that corner, even with the crease. So I'm just going to add one more loop here, use E for even, and then move it over there. And as you can see now, that corner looks fine. And I just have to slide some vertices here because now those are very close together. So double G and slide, and just do some small tweaks there, and also here. And so now it all looks fine. And we can have a look at the result. And let's also have a look at it with a more shiny matte cap. That's always interesting, especially with this kind of smooth object. So as you can see, we have a nice transition there. And let's add a couple more loops to make this hole a bit sharper. Even with creasing, sometimes you need to add a bit more geometry. So now as you can see, this part looks fine. And we have this nice overhanging edge everywhere. And with 3 levels of subdivision, it looks even better.